The Sony A7RV, Sony's highest resolution alpha body, at least as of 2024. But is it the camera for you? Let's find out. Now, I'm sure that a lot of you guys have been seeing the buzz surrounding the new A9 Mark III and wanted to know which one should you get, the A7R5 or the A9 Mark III. Well, starting right off with the price, the A7R5 right here retails for $3,900 for the body only, while the A9 Mark III comes in at a whopping $6,000 for just a body. So we're talking about an $1,100 price difference, which is not minor in any way, unless you have like unlimited finances. In which case, then that's great for you. But for the rest of us who actually really have to sacrifice a bit to get these bodies, you really have to take into account all of the features in both of them and see which one might fit your specific needs. So I wanted to start off this review by doing a bit of a comparison between the newest entrant into Sony's top-of-the-line market. And so, in my opinion, there's really three major questions that you need to ask yourself before you go one way or the other. Number one is, do I care about resolution more or do I care about speed? The second one is, do I have lenses or am I going to have to be getting lenses? And third, do I make money from my photography or videography, and if so, how much? These are really going to be the biggest guiding questions as to whether or not you go with this body, the A7R5, or if you go with the new one, the A9 Mark III. So jumping right in here to number one, this is really the primary differentiator, I think, between the R5 and the A9 Mark III. So the R5 here, this is going to be a 61 megapixel body with the ability to shoot up to 240 megapixel photos if you use pixel shift technology, which can produce stunning results, although it has to be in the right conditions, so the 240 megapixels is kind of a moot point. But the A9 Mark III shoots 24.6 megapixel photos, so it's definitely going to be a lot lower in resolution, but it does have that brand new global shutter and the ability to capture 240 frames a second raw photos with blackout-free capture and flash sync up to 1/80,000 seconds. So that is pretty awesome. But why is global shutter going to be relevant to you? Well, it's really going to be relevant only if you're shooting things that are moving fast, things like cars, motorsports, or if you're shooting regular sports like snowboarding or other things like that where people are going to be moving really, really quickly across the frame. You might actually end up wanting to have that global shutter to freeze action and not have warping. This is particularly relevant when you're talking about baseball or if you're talking about golf where people are swinging something very, very quickly. You can see a lot of noticeable banding and warping. This also happens in archery and in crossbow and other types of things like that. Again, you're talking about objects moving at a very fast rate. So that's where global shutter comes in. And global shutter basically just means that it's going to capture the entire image all at once. Where with rolling shutter, like on the R5 and pretty much every other camera that you're used to this point, it's going to have a slight delay from the top to the bottom. So essentially it reads from the top and scans down to the bottom, and by the end of it you have a total photo. But because there is a slight amount of delay with that, you are going to end up with some sort of artifacting in, again, those fast niche cases. So for number two, this is really, really important and should be a major consideration for you. So let's say, for example, that you have a $6,500 budget to spend on camera gear, and you're choosing between these two bodies. And if you don't have a lens yet, with the A9 Mark III, you're only going to have enough to buy the body and a cheap lens like maybe a Sony 28-60 f4-5.6. which is going to be a pretty slow lens. It's not going to be as sharp as you might like. And yeah, you're just not really going to get the most out of it. So that's kind of a pretty big consideration. The other thing too is that these bodies don't come with storage, so you have to add that on. And you're really only going to be able to get a pair of low capacity SD cards, like probably 64 gigabytes, and they might not even be fast like the V90 cards, they might be V60, so just keep that in mind. So let's take it and apply it to the R5. So we take the same exact budget and we apply it to the R5. Now you can buy the body for about $4,000, and then they'll give you about $2,500 left over for a lens. So that is a much better position to be in. You could get pretty much any lens that you want for that price. And my recommendation here would be to get something versatile, or maybe get a couple of primes. So if you're looking for something versatile, I think probably getting the 24-105 f4 from Sony is going to be your best choice. That's going to be about $1,250. You can find it used for a little bit cheaper, or you can get a couple of Sigma lenses that are zooms for maybe $800 or thereabouts. And you can also get some primes if you wanted. Instead of getting zooms, you could get one of the nice f1.2 primes from Sony for about $1,700-$1,800, and again, you'd still have quite a bit of money left over. So you could easily get a pair of 128GB V90 cards. You could also get 256GB V90 cards. If you skimped out a little bit on lenses, you could even get all the way up to the CF Express Type A cards, which are going to be the fastest for the fastest image capture, but they're going to be very, very, very expensive. So just keep that in mind. Finally, what do you actually use your camera for professionally? If you're not using your camera to make you money and you just want to have something to capture your memories, if you're going between these two bodies, I would say go with the R5. The R5 is going to be a much cheaper option. It's going to be a higher resolution option. And if you're trying to remember things, you really can't do any better than this. This camera is absolutely fantastic. I mean, there are some other cameras out there like the Hasselblad X100D that are 100 megapixels, medium format, but those cameras are also kind of pushing $10,000. So, you know, you're still paying a substantial amount of money. But like I said, this does have pixel shift, which you can do 240 megapixel photos with, so that's definitely an option. And like I said, if you want to be remembering your things in the best possible light, this body is going to do that for you. But that's basically that for the comparison. I really just wanted to start this video off with a little bit of context, since I know that there's newer cameras out there from Sony that may fit your style a little bit better, and I didn't want you to waste too much time on this video if you think that one of those cameras might be a better fit for you. If you're still with me, you probably want to learn a little bit more about the R5, so let's get into it. But before we do, I would be remiss to mention that there is actually another body from Sony, the A7CR, which you can get right now for $3,000. So you'll save about $1,000 over this body, and you'll get the same 61 megapixel BSI sensor from the R5, but it does lack a couple of the features like the really high resolution centered EVF, the fully articulating rear screen, and a couple of other smaller features. But you're going to be getting a smaller compact design, so if you're into that type of thing, that might be a good option for you. So definitely take a look at that after you're done with this video. So diving right in here, the body features a robust magnesium alloy build, which feels extremely sturdy in the hand, and it has a nice deep grip, which is like most of the newer Sony bodies, which makes it really comfortable to hold. It also has features that I had mentioned before, like a high-resolution 9.44 million dot EVF, which is definitely going to be a nice thing when you're taking pictures out in the field. You're going to be getting a much higher resolution preview than the back display. And speaking of that back display, this is definitely one of my favorite features, especially when we're talking about shooting video. It has a full multi-point touchscreen with both tilt and rotation abilities, so you no longer have to compromise on your screen type. My favorite aspects of this design, however, are the fully customizable dials and buttons all over the body, as well as especially the locking dials and mode selectors at the top of the body. So taking a look here, these are super useful, and it makes it really easy to transition between modes without having the potential of accidentally switching when you're moving from one place to another. The mode dial at the top has a button in the middle which you just need to press in and twist to change through your modes. Below that, you're going to have another dial which sort of encompasses this, which has a push button design, and that's going to be your switcher, so you can switch between photo, video, and S&Q mode. So again, it'll only move if you intentionally press in the button and rotate. And the last dial like this on the camera is going to be this customizable dial right over here, which has a click lock in it. So basically you press it in, it'll click, unlock, and now you can rotate it freely. When you're done making your adjustments, just click it again and it's not going to be able to rotate. So that's a really, really nice feature. And getting into the features a little bit more deeply here, this is of course a Sony E-mount body, so any of your E-mount lenses are going to work on this camera, and they're going to be able to give you up to 10 FPS of 14-bit raw image capture on high plus mode in the mechanical shutter. As I had mentioned at the top of this video, this is primarily a photography camera with the 61 megapixel sensor being the headlining feature. But it also has a secondary headlining feature, which is going to be that AI engine for faster and more accurate autofocus. Now, this is a feature that I both love and hate at the same time. Don't get me wrong, the photos are going to look absolutely fantastic, and the autofocus is best in class. But one thing that I just really can't get over is how they boast about the AI functionality being able to add something amazing to this camera, but they failed to add perhaps the most obvious feature, at least to me, which is content-aware autofocus. So let me explain. If you're out there in the field and you're taking photos of birds, for example, which is something that I do quite frequently, then you're going to want to have the autofocus target set to bird, since that's going to give you the most accurate tracking for a bird's eye, and it's going to snap right on. If you then see a really cool land animal, like a fox or something like that, and you want to take a photo of that, the camera's not going to automatically snap to its eye the same way that it was when you were shooting birds. And to do that, you'd have to switch your autofocus target to animal or bird/animal. Now, I know that you can do that bird/animal mode, and that will minimize this to an extent, but the autofocus quality between the dedicated subject modes and the combined bird/animal mode is going to be enough to make it a little bit more desirable to go with the single subject modes, since you're going to get that super precise, super sharp autofocus right on the eye. Which again gets me back to the point that I'd like it so much better if the autofocus worked for all subject types without having to manually switch. I mean, obviously the camera can do this. It can focus on cars, it can focus on planes, people, birds, animals, bugs, all of that type of stuff it can do. So why not have it so that you can just point at something and it'll automatically autofocus to it, right to its eye? Because it's probably been trained on a lot of pictures of birds, animals, other types of things like that, and so you would imagine that that technology would be possible, but unfortunately it's not here right now. It's a bit of a complaint for me. Not major, not a deal breaker, but something to keep in mind. But one thing that you can do to alleviate this to a degree is to set up custom modes. So for me on the top, I have one set up to be bird autofocus with a really high shutter speed so that I can freeze action quickly when I'm outside. I have M2 set up to do portrait photography, since that's another thing that I do quite frequently. And you also can set up your third one to do animal or whatever else you might be interested in taking photos of. Moving on though to video, which is the second reason why I bought this camera. Even though this does have a 61 megapixel sensor and it's a photography beast, it still does hold its own in terms of video. So it shoots cropless at up to 4K 30 FPS, or you can do 4K 60 or 8K 24 with a 1.24x crop. So you can record at H.264, H.265, and you can also do Sony's XAVC SI, all intra formats. And if you have something like the Atomos Ninja 5 Plus, you can even output 16-bit linear RAW over HDMI, which is going to record in ProRes RAW, which is a really great pro feature. You can also record at 422 10-bit in all of the 4K resolutions with S-Log3, or you can do 8K at 420 10-bit with S-Log3. So you definitely do have a lot of, in terms of room to play around with, in terms of processing and color grading and look development, all of the types of things that professionals would actually really care about. So this is definitely a really good camera, even for video. But though the video features are great on paper, in reality the images are going to look a little bit less high quality than something that's more suited for video. So for me right now, you're watching through a Sony FX3 and the Sony 24-105G lens. So this is going to be pretty much the highest quality that I can get right now, since the FX3 is designed specifically for digital cinema. Even though it has that lower 12 megapixel sensor, this camera has a really fast sensor readout speed, and in my opinion, the video just looks generally better. The A7RV video doesn't look bad by any means. And I've used it on weddings, I've used it on other projects, and I've intercut between the FX3 and this one with no complaints from my clients. So I really wouldn't worry about it too much, but it is something that you'll notice as you're going through and editing your footage. I'll also note that for photos, the base ISO is 100, and for video, the base ISO is going to be 800. So that's going to be pretty good. And even if you're pushing this up to something like 12,800 for video, you're definitely going to see a little bit of noise, but with a little bit of work in post, you can make the high ISO video look pretty decent, especially if you're in a dark environment and you don't really care about crushing the blacks. One thing that you really can't do too much about in post though is rolling shutter, and at 4K 24 rolling shutter is minimal. I wouldn't really think that it's anything that you'd really notice or have a problem with. Even at 4K 60, it's not too bad. The worst rolling shutter that I've ever seen at 4K 60 was when I was filming a train passing by me. You could really see the lines sort of warping a bit, and that was a little bit noticeable, but it wasn't really that bad. And under normal circumstances, I'd say that it's passable. It's not bad at all. And especially if you're doing things like weddings, where you're going to be generally moving at a normal pace and doing parallax shots and things like that, you're really not going to notice it. It's not a problem whatsoever. Where I really can't excuse the rolling shutter, however, is at 8K 24. So this resolution is amazing for capturing the most detail possible in a scene for video, but it comes with a major drawback, which is that if you're trying to capture any sort of motion, the video is going to look like a sloppy mess. It's really disorienting and dizzying. So I'd only really recommend using 8K if your subject is 1, relatively static, and number 2, if you have a great tripod with a fluid head. So lastly, I just wanted to mention a couple of other things about the camera. This works with the Sony Creator app, so if you're out there in the field and you want to quickly transfer photos to your phone, you can do that. Also, you can operate the camera remotely from your phone, although it does usually drop the connection the first time that you do it, but after you reconnect, it's generally stable. So that's a bit annoying, but it's not the end of the world. And for those of you guys who like astrophotography, this is really nice because it has a built-in intervalometer. So if you want to set it up on a tripod and capture time lapses at full 61 megapixels, it's going to be absolutely fantastic for that. It also has bracketing for exposure as well as for focus, and it also has 8 stops of IBIS for great stabilization to your images, so that's really nice. So I know that this was a little bit of a long video, but I wanted to give you all of the information that I think you would really care about for the A7R5. And do I think it's worth it in 2024? Absolutely, yeah. I have loved using this camera for my personal projects, as well as for professional client shoots. Every time that I take this camera out to shoot, I get super excited to come back to my editing desk and review all of the photos that I've taken, because if you've only ever been taking photos on your smartphone your whole life, let me tell you, this is going to change your life. Being able to zoom into portraits or wildlife photos and see this much detail at such a high level of zoom is going to absolutely blow you away. I cannot tell you how many times that I've taken pictures at a zoo, at an art gallery, people, any types of things like that, and I've zoomed in and I've seen things that I didn't see when I was there because I just don't have that sort of resolution in my eyes. If I can't get super close to something, there's a lot of detail that I'm going to be missing. And this is definitely going to be something that will give you a load of enjoyment, and your clients are going to absolutely love it if you're going to be using this for professional purposes. But with that being said, I hope you guys liked the video, and if you did, definitely be sure to drop a like, smash that subscribe button. We're still working towards getting to 1,000 subs, and I'd love to have you guys as a part of the community. And of course, leave your comments down below. Also, as always, if you liked anything in the video and you want to check it out for yourself, please use the links in the description, as they'll help the channel out a little bit and they're not going to cost you anything extra. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Later.